Here's what I know. At the end of the day, what people really care about and what they want to know about are the fires that you've walked through.
I mean, I went all over the country in search of, what was right in front of me everywhere I went. I just wasn't doing the work.
I'm in recovery, a professional, almost 30, and I still go on Facebook and feel like shit about myself sometimes. But, and
I don't mean to laugh, but it's true. It's why I had to get off, because I know how my mind goes with that.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? You know what I mean? Like, there are no pipe dreams anymore when we're sober, right? Like, there are no pipe dreams to a 29-year-old who lived from 18 to 29 getting high on every substance in the book, most of which has put a lot of my friends into the ground, and I'm still here. Not to say like, oh, that's too grandiose. Oh, man.
So, Joe, I'm just curious, like, when you heard we were doing this and you heard, we had different guests, what made you want to come on it?
I think it was the three of you, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was just the chance to kind of talk recovery with three people that I respect, I don't know. I've recently taken a much deeper appreciation to talking any and all things recovery, both from what I do for a living. Like, very much learned that in the last 6 to 12 months, I can very much nerd out over talking shop, much to Anna's chagrin, my wife's chagrin. She doesn't necessarily always love when I'm talking to somebody about work, but I get so into it. And I think because I've taken such a deeper passion about my role, my professional role, and how it has the opportunity to translate to my personal beliefs of being someone in recovery. So I think I looked at it partly for that, the excitement to kind of come on and just talk recovery with the three of you. But again, a little bit of the competitive in me said you had Manny, you had Joe Beck. I want to jump on too. And I saw Manny earlier today. I was like, I'm doing the podcast tonight, so you no longer have that on it, But no, like I said, I'm a really big fan of podcasts, and I just like the opportunity to get to, have dialogue with people, all of whom I respect, and, share some interesting insight with. So, and Mace, it's been too long since you and I've seen each other.
I know. Well, I didn't have your number. That was the problem.
It's been far too long since you and I have gotten to connect. So that was just an added bonus.
Yeah, thank you. You said something really cool when you said that intersection between your personal and professional life. And here's the thing, I have probably, I'm an LPC, I'm a certified bomb recovery coach, I'm a certified life coach, I'm a grief cert. I just have all these acronyms after my name. And here's what I know. At the end of the day, what people really care about and what they want to know about are the fires that you've walked through.
Mm-hmm.
And all three of you, I know, have walked through some pretty serious fires. And you've come out on the other end. And people want to know, how did you do it? But also from a family perspective, hey, was there something that I did as a family member that contributed? Or are there things that I did that added to your suffering?
Yeah.
We hate to hear it that way. It's a hard reality, but there's things that we do as family members, whether it's a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, a partner, a husband or wife. Just because we don't know, we end up adding to the suffering and the pain of your journey. And so that's one of the reasons for us even doing this podcast. And and it's funny because I've worked with you in the family program for what we did that for, gosh, a year, and it was great. And it's just you saw it, like how families just loved to hear. They were just like thirsty to hear, like, how can I help my loved one? Because again, we're left there feeling like, and we're told, well, there's nothing you can do unless the person wants to change. But there are things you can do, even if it's just holding out hope that your loved one can change. That's something you can do. So that's what our podcast is about. is just giving family members from inside addiction, what's helpful that you can do, what's not helpful. And we always just hope that our listeners, even if just one person gets one new strategy, coping skill, insight, inspiration, hope, then for us, it's worth every minute that we do this. So
Yeah.
thanks for being part of it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Let me just say this, that Matt and I both work at Steps. You're former Steps employee, but I just want to say that this YouTube channel, the Ask the Addict, is separate from our work at STR. This is totally separate from that. But we do take the questions that are, because we offer a family Zoom support group. So we do take some of the questions from that group.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you acknowledging that. We'll call it like a conflict of interest, I guess, right? Just for the formalities, because I have it too. Like I work for programs that are in Montgomery County that are in the same space, and we've often talked about the way that, like Tony mentioned, he knows what my home group is, right? It's a Sunday night AA meeting right on Bristol Emily Road, right there in Levittown. And when I worked at STR, it would happen where the clients used to go to that meeting on Sunday nights, and I'd have clients like approach me after just seeing me the morning before at the family programming, and not like want to talk to me, but I'd have to ultimately tell them, as you just did, like, yo, like I'm not the same guy, but like I would not tell you something Saturday morning as a clinical intern working with Mace for STR and the family program the same way I will here outside of my home group. So that conflict of interest is important to own. And, I certainly, have it too, even in the format like this. And I think that's part of the journey for me. And I'm sure, Matt can certainly attest to it. Is like, we are influenced in our professional lives by our personal, but yet we are also stressed upon the importance of, and Tony, forgive me, I don't know if you work in the space as well. If you do, you can get it. If you don't, you can still probably get it. But like, I've been constantly always in this never push pull, because I've worked for programs, do now, have before, that supported my compartmentalizing the two. It wasn't encouraged to be enmeshed to better my professional journey by applying my personal. It was always encouraged to be, separated healthy. But, it's always been something I've had to return to is, what hat am I wearing? Am I wearing my personal recovery hat? Am I wearing my clinical hat that I went back to school to achieve and earn? Or am I wearing my business development hat, right? Like my hat that's operation driven and marketing driven and stuff. And it's a constant chance for me to size myself up and be like, where am I, like, what am I walking into? And then therefore, what hat do I need to have on? So for this one, undoubtedly, it's certainly that personal recovery hat of mine. But yeah, it's sometimes tough to make sure I'm wearing the correct one in certain conversations.
Dude, I mean that's something I struggle with all the time, and I think that's why my recovery has kind of evolved to look a lot different over the years. Because same thing, like the meetings I used to go to, I started working in the field, and now I'm a therapist, and I have like my clients showing up to that meeting, and then I'm seeing them, and then I have former clients, and they're trying to like, oh dude, we should hang out and catch up sometime. And it's like I can't participate in the same way at those meetings anymore, because I can't put my hand up and talk about the stuff I'm going through, because whether it's going to be like used against me or just some sort of like subconscious thought that like it 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 breaks down like the walls of the therapist and the treatment provider to, hey, this is like a person, and now we know what Matt's going through and struggling with, and does that make his advice or opinions any less sound? Or and that the like enmeshment, I have clients that are like, dude, I got a sponsor, his name's so and so, and I'm like, oh shit, that's my roommate, man. Like I can't say that. So I'm like, what's my friend gonna be telling my client? And how are they
Yeah.
gonna figure this out? And it's all
Yeah.
just so. But I kind of
Hmm.
just gotta like sit back and be like, well, we'll see what happens. But it's almost
Yeah.
like an unavoidable thing, but I think that's why I've kind of gravitated more towards like different recovery modalities, trying
Hmm.
out different meetings I know people aren't going to. Like I have a small support group that I've sort of like cultivated. It's like an unofficial meeting, but we meet every Wednesday night to like break
Right.
down like the book and everything. So like just kind of venturing out, I think, has been good in some ways, but I
Yeah.
definitely feel like, hey, I can't hit the diner with a bunch of dudes in AA as
Right.
much,
Right.
as I used
Yeah.
to, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so to answer your question, Joe, I think that I can remember when I first, and I don't work in the treatment field. I'm a barber. So
Nice.
but you know what? I went from when I first
You're
got
as
in
much of a
trouble.
therapist as I am, by the way, and
Right?
being a barber. Let me
Well,
own that.
I
Let
hear
me
some
just own
stuff.
that.
I hear
I
some
bet
stuff.
you're an unpaid
That's for
therapist.
sure. That's for sure. But yeah, I feel like I should be licensed sometimes
Yeah.
as many stories as I hear too.
I
But
bet. I bet.
I remember because when I got in trouble when I first got introduced to AA and A years ago, like some 20 years ago, I remember going to treatment centers, going inside of court buildings. And I remember that judicial figure, whether it was a therapist, whether it was a prison guard, a jail guard, whether it was a lawyer. I remember not making a connection with that person until I went to my first treatment center and talked to a person who was, they had their degrees and they had their licenses, just like you, Matt, and of course Mace, but like you guys, they were one of me. And like, that was the coolest. I was just like, dang, I said, how did they get like, because at that time and for new people that come around for the first time, it's like, how were they like me, but yet they're working in a facility. These facilities are beautiful now. They're working in a facility like this and they're able to help people. Like, it was one of my first times that I had hope that my life could do something good.
Mm.
When I found out that, wow, there are people that are in recovery that actually it's like we don't even think about it now, but like 20 years ago, I was like, somebody that struggled like me could get licensed, help
Mm.
another person out, work in a nice place, dress nice when they come to work. And that gave me a little hope when I first started out that I'm going to be okay. And
Yeah.
so you guys do incredible work, and that's why I love to hear you guys take on this podcast to help the family members out. And I just try to keep it, for me, on my experience with, how I remember my family, struggling to know how to help me at first.
Mm.
And figuring, after years of me coming in and out and then staying sober and then, finally accumulating some decent time now, knowing where they're at now and just wanting to like accelerate, you know what I
Mm.
mean? How much families can help and how much they can hurt their loved one early on. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what continues to drive me in order to, continue to share and continue to listen to you guys who have been on this side of it, and are now also on the professional side of it and working with working with alcoholics and addicts every day.
Yeah, no,
Pretty
I
cool.
appreciate
Yeah, man.
you pointing that out, honestly, because I've admittedly become a little almost like cynical of that approach of a person needs to have been through it in order to help somebody. And I know that that's not what you're trying to say,
Mm-hmm.
but I've seen clients want to take that defense, right? That,
Yeah.
well, my therapist doesn't know what it's like. How can they help me? And it's just like, because they care, right?
Mm.
Like, because they care to help you. But much to your point, and I love this, and I have to say, I don't know if I've ever considered it this way. Treatment offers that, I like, perhaps for the first time, that real example of, no, this is a person in their professional life taking care of theirs, right? Taking
Right.
care of their business. Because in AA and NA, that's not what we're exposed to all the time, right? What are we exposed to? We're exposed to 45 minutes to an hour, give or take, hour to an hour and a half, whatever, once a week, multiple times a week. But we're watching a person intentionally go attend this meeting that is for their recovery, right? So whether their recovery is strong or not, there's the chance to walk through that door and be like, yeah, like I'm on my recovery stuff, right? But how is that person in their day job, right? Quite literally, right? Like, and that's something I always tell my sponsees is like, yo, anybody can be a good recovering in the rooms, right? Like, are you applying these principles to all of your affairs, right? Like, if I tell my sponsees, like, if I asked your wife, where's your recovery at? She's going to give me a more accurate response than you will, right? But I appreciate you pointing that out, because in treatment, especially for those of us who do feel understandably as if like our lives are going nowhere and will never amount to anything, we're seeing people not only living the gifts of recovery, but in the professional world, right? It's like, yo, you really are like showing up to work. You're good at your job. You're on time. You don't seem to be sweating that someone's going to come and let you and relieve you of your duties like I always was when I was at my jobs, when I was still out there in my mess, right? So, yeah, I mean, like, I do think that there is such a beauty in the demonstration of that. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
hey, like, this is someone who can take care of their business, right? Like, quite literally by showing up to work every day and being able to kind of be the example. And yeah, I think that's what inspires us into the field. Um, and then sometimes we just find ourselves in it, and you know, that's kind of how my situation was. Like, I didn't come out to Levittown to get sober. To And it's funny because like I make the joke, like, how many people are in treatment saying like, I'm going to work in treatment when I'm done, right? Like a decent amount, right? Because of everything you just said, Tony, right? Like the hope of, for the first time, like I see someone who's like me, right? Who knows how I feel. If my therapist is in recovery, or even if it's just like the care coordinators and like the everyday staff, right? Like, I'm so inspired to do something. And if I'm honest with myself, if I'm young or impressionable still, I'm like, well, I don't know a trade. I may not have finished school. Like, I don't know what I don't know, but I know drugs. I know alcohol. I may know if I get my own recovery, I can do this. So many people are like, I'm going to work in recovery. I was never really that person. And yet I ended up working in recovery, you know, and I just attribute that to God kind of, you know, putting people back in my life from my childhood at a time that he did, where, you know, it's like I didn't know what I was going to do, but, you know, I applied to work at STR as a simple behavioral health technician, as a care coordinator. And, you know, it turns out someone I knew worked in another area. And 4 years later, it's kind of completely shaped me working in the field and what I do in the field too.
Right.
But I love what y'all are saying, and I hope the folks that are listening I really get this. And I just want to underscore it, because I know that from a family member perspective, like let me speak from my perspective as a family member of somebody in long-term recovery. I was so obsessed with my loved one not getting a criminal record, because I thought, oh my God, if he gets a criminal record, then there goes any chance of any type of career for him.
Yeah.
And so I became obsessed with, you know, paying for the attorneys. I mean, he had 3 arrests. And I was like, I got to pay for an attorney. I got to get him in a first offenders program. I got to get his record expunged. I got to get to make sure. And just the craziness of that.
My mom did the same thing. She exhausted lines of credit and you name it. She did everything. She did everything she could. And no, I think your underscore though is important, right? Is I know plenty of people who work in our, because sometimes unfortunately like family members may hear this after that ship has sailed, right? Like after, you know, the record may already have something on it. You know what I mean? And there are amazing opportunities. And I do think that society has, as hard as it is to generalize in that way, I do think that the stigma that we are very much still trying to combat, I think has improved. I think the exasperation of substance use disorder following COVID has kind of helped to move the needle in the terms of like, we can't always continue to look at those in recovery or even those in active use as like these, like, you know, downcast type of people. I think like the stigma has been lifted a little bit. But I do appreciate, yeah, exactly that like a person can have made mistakes and it's not to say this field, but it could be any field. Like there is hope to the person who may have anything on their record that they're still able to work in a field where they can bring a sense of purpose and self, dedication to a craft that they can. And I always say, I think that's one of the most important things about early recovery. You know what I mean? Like I think we sometimes don't impress upon enough the importance of just really being able to show up to life, right? And part of that is whatever I do for a living. Like when I got sober, I, was a subcontractor that moved cars at a place in New Jersey because I still had a valid driver's license. Like that was what I did. And then I worked at a pallet repair place in Bristol, Pennsylvania, and I repaired pallets and I hated it. But like I did what I had to do, like I didn't set out with 6 months sober to try to overtake a career once lost or take on this, like, I need to make up for 12 years from 18 to 29 when I got sober. Like I didn't have this mentality of I need to set out and make up for lost time, and I think that's what gets a lot of people early on jammed up is this idea that like I got sober at 29. Like I'm 29 and I'm living in a recovery house and my everyone has moved on from me and friendships and relationships and manners like that. And like my brother who was 1 year older than me, or is 1 year older than me, like was about to have a baby and already owned a house. And like I could have allowed all of that to get in my head and be like, you need to hustle and grind and you need to go get your career in the next 30 days. Otherwise, you're going to continue to be a failure. And I knew that didn't work because I spent the majority of my later 20s trying to figure it out that way. You know what I mean? Being 25 and thinking, okay, if I go to this recovery house, I'm going to get my life together in 3 months and, someone's going to offer me this amazing career opportunity and I'm no longer going to have to work as a server in the restaurant business. And it doesn't really happen like that. It happens when it's supposed to and it happens, but it is important. You know what I mean? And that's why I encourage guys to make decisions that help them to, feel like they're setting down some sort of roots, right? Like I went to recovery house after recovery house after recovery house. And I think when I got to Levittown, I was very much invested in let's not just make this the next one, right? Like, so what can I do? And transferring my license from New Jersey to Pennsylvania was a huge move for me because it gave me this sense of, okay, you're trying to make this a home, right? Like not just the physical house I was in, but like buying into the moving out, to the being out here. I don't think that's encouraged enough. Maybe it's because I work in treatment and I see the unfortunate the ins and outs, right? Those who are constantly kind of in and out of programs and stuff, and it's maybe hard in that sense. But I mean, that's what I tell people in AA, especially in Levittown, where there's a lot of transplants who are from all over in treatment in this area or recovery houses. I'm like, it's either going to be the last one or just the next one, and like what you're doing is gonna have a big say in it. You know what I mean? Are you looking for work? Are you maybe moving your Medicaid to this county? Are you like those things seem, mundane, but in reality, for me, they were the exact opposite. They were, let's make this the last one. And, thankfully, through God, it has been the last recovery house I had to live in.
I I think part of the human condition is to want to have purpose and
Mm-hmm.
to want to self-actualize and transcend and feel like you're doing something. And when you get a job that feels like it's just a dead-end job, like, hey, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
make $20 working at, Wawa or whatever, but it's like there's not really anywhere for me to go from here. I can pay my bills, fine, but like what's the next step?
Yeah.
It just it's very defeating, and I think
Mm-hmm.
even before I went through like getting sober, that was something I struggled with. Like I got out of college and I had this notion of like, oh, to be successful, you're supposed to be making like close to six figures immediately,
Mm-hmm.
which is like almost impossible for like a 22-year-old unless you really know somebody. But
Mm-hmm.
I think because of that, I turned down avenues that I was like, well, I'm gonna start at a lower salary, but I'll, in 8 years I can work my way up, and by the time I'm 30, I'll be making six. It's like I wanted
Mm-hmm.
that the classic addiction of like I want the self or the instant gratification, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I see a lot of people fall into this trap where they just get sober and they want to get a job that makes like the most money. But it's like, what are you setting yourself up for? Because you're gonna work here, you'll make some money, it'll be feel great to get back on your feet and to pay your bills, pay some of the debt, maybe get your own place, but it's like what's next after that? Because
Right.
I think that's it, going into like the medium to longer term sobriety is things that
Hmm.
I see a lot is people just don't have that sense of like that drive, that purpose, what's fueling me and
Yeah.
what's next, So I think as hard as it can be when, hey, I'm 2 months sober, I'm looking to get a job, it's really important to like, how is this setting me up down the line? And what do I need to do now instead of just taking the best available and,
Yeah.
kind of seeing what happens?
What would
Man,
you say that
go
is?
ahead.
I'm sorry,
No, go
but
ahead.
I'm curious. Yeah, what would you say that is, Matt? Like time frame wise, that medium to long term like goal? Because you referenced the 2 months, right? So I think we can all consider that to be the earlier onset recovery, right? But I
Yeah.
agree 100% with what you're saying. Like, where do you feel that a person may be able to begin to kind of look more toward, like I wouldn't ask someone with 2 years sober what their or 2 months sober what their 5 year goal is, right? But
Yeah.
I would ask
Mhm.
somebody with a certain amount of months, like, okay, like you're talking level up here. Like what, so I'm curious, what is that for you? Like that, and not to say it's always definitive, it's very case by case, right? Like everything else. But like what do
Yeah.
you see as that?
I I would say that probably starts around a year,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah.
Um, and then probably that 1 to 3 year mark of like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's go from I need to put food on the table
Mm-hmm.
and pay for my car insurance so I can, get back and forth to work
Sure.
or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
To like, hey, what am I doing? And dude, actually, like, you were someone that I talked to about going back to
Mm-hmm.
school a lot when I was
Yeah.
working in the field and I had kind of like started to develop my career, but even like I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And,
Right.
I had this when I was doing the alumni job in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm gonna be honest, man, like if I got fired today, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know what my skill set is. I don't know what's next. And you were someone that was really like, dude, go get your MSW. Go back to
Yeah.
school. It's not that bad. You could do
Yeah.
it. You're gonna be sitting there in 3 years anyway, wishing that you had done it, but you didn't,
Yes, that's
you
the
know?
thing, dude. I've had so many conversations. People are like, I want to do this. And then 3 years later, they're like, I want to do this. I'm like, if you just did it, you'd be
Yeah.
done right now. So
Yeah, and that
love
I
you for
think
bringing that up.
that's something that I've really just come to realize as I've gotten a little bit older is like the
Mhm.
time's gonna go by regardless, so I might as well just
Regardless,
do something with the time,
what position am
you
I putting myself in that time? Yeah.
Exactly.
I want to back up to something that Joe said, and that he shares with his sponsees and his guys, and it's so important because I had the same similar type story with him with all the treatment centers that are nationwide and sober houses and recovery houses. I mean, I thought I was a kid traveling in band camp, all the
Mm.
cities and oh, let's look up which recovery city is the most densely populated with people that sober in St. Paul, Minneapolis, California, Florida. I mean, I went all over the
Hmm.
country in search of, what was right in front of me everywhere I went. I just wasn't doing the work. We know that age old story, but
Yeah.
I think it is so important for and also this is to the families, like it is so important for your loved one when they find a community where they get the start, whether it's a month, 3 months, 6 months, and they have that energy behind them. It is so important for them to stay put there for a period of time, and I'm talking minimum 5 years. And the
Hmm.
reason for that is because as an alcoholic or addict, if people get to know me and they know what makes me tick and they know that, hey, I haven't seen Tony around in a while. Like, I wonder how he's doing. I can go to another place very easily and hide, and
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden I'm by myself. I'm in a new area. People don't know me. Nobody's gonna know if I go into the club or the bar or whatever
Hmm.
down the street. Like, versus it's a lot higher risk of me seeing somebody out that if I'm not doing something I'm supposed to, somebody's going to be like, "Man, Tony, you're not supposed to be going out of the club. Are you okay, man?"
Hmm.
Like, it is so important for guys and girls to get roots where they're at, where they find their sobriety. And I just went through, I celebrated 5 years in January, and I have a great job that I'm doing at another location now. This location is much busier. I'm making 4 or 5 times more money, And it was offered, by if I told my job tomorrow I want to move to Norristown to, continue on with the company and stuff, they would probably help me move. They would say, hey, they would be all for it. But who's not all for it is me. And because I don't have a wife, I don't have a girlfriend, I don't have kids. But what I do have is a sobriety community here that I am unwilling to part with.
Yeah.
Because I parted with that sobriety community in 2015 and went out to Wisconsin, and things didn't go so well. I mean, I ended up in state prison. So, it finding those roots and setting them there is a great thing for the families to encourage their loved one. After they do that 3 months in the sober house and they've been to treatment, hey, why don't you try to set a goal for yourself and maybe say, hey, I'm going to stay here for at least a year and see how this goes. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to go back home. I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to move with Aunt Peggy and Aunt Susie and the ex-boyfriend and the ex-girlfriend. I'm going to stay where I'm at because these are the good people that I've met. That's super important. And I know it was super important for me to be connected in a community,
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. No, I mean, I think of all my experiences, where getting back home was always the end goal, right? And I'm like, I don't know if I knew deep down I wasn't done yet, so it was just always easier to return to a form of home base that I was familiar with. But yeah, I mean, like when I work with people now, professionally or personally, like I got to be honest, I don't know many. Not to generalize, I don't know many success stories though that end where they began, right? That like left mom and dad's and went and did treatment and then returned to mom and dad's, and just kept it moving, right? Like it's just, and it's not even the people, places, and things. Like you said, yeah, that's true, but it's just more like I think it's more of a mental regression almost. Like, and it's not to say it has to be, but there are times in which I consider like, okay, if we work with an adult population, right? First of all, if you're an adult, right? You are a legal adult. Therefore, your parents have the ability, right? And I was just not arguing with, but a father was expressing his discontentment to me the other day, saying, I can't stand that I have to keep them insured until 26, but yet they're an adult to do whatever they want from 18 till 26. So if that's the way it should be, then I shouldn't have to. I'm like, I'm not arguing with you, guy. Like, I know better than to argue with you in this mode. But like, part of me is just like, there's a valid point to that, right? Like, where if I'm doing this as an adult, right, and a lot of my time in recovery is spent on working on those things that I feel this sense of regret, shame, remorse for the younger adults, right? It's like, why not consider maybe not even going home, right? Why not consider? That's why I asked Matt that question, like, because that's a similar time frame for me. I say around that 10-month to a year mark. It's like, okay, hopefully by now, if you've stayed sober this long, you've done it one of two ways. You've either white knuckled it till this long, which sucks, or you very well may be working a program of recovery. And if that's the case, then you should have some inner values and personal stuff that you have now worked on that can leverage you being able to do something with your life. So yes, and Mace will know what I'm about to say as far as the flipping burgers. When I first got sober, there was a guy who said, when I flip burgers at McDonald's, when I first got sober, I flipped those effing burgers better than anyone flipped burgers. And I'm like, that's the move, right? Because yes, I could think, all I'm doing is flipping burgers at McDonald's, right? But if I'm trying to do it the best that anyone's ever done it, it changes my perspective. And now I have purpose again, like what Matt said. But if a year in, I'm not trying to, nothing wrong with flipping burgers, right? Like people go to McDonald's in the millions. Therefore, people need to work there in order to feed those millions. And that's considerable. But if my goal is to that level up, right, to that form of a greater purpose, or I want to apply this gift that I have of life again, like I'm not likely doing that while I'm just working at McDonald's if I'm not also leveraging other things. So to that point, I say, what do you want to do? You know what I mean? Like, there are no pipe dreams anymore as when we're sober, right? Like there are no pipe dreams to a 29-year-old who lived from 18 to 29 getting high on every substance in the book, most of which has put a lot of my friends into the ground. And I'm still here, not to say like, oh, that's too grandiose. Oh, a master's degree is too out of reach. Like, no, it's like, let's find a way to make it fit into what you're doing. So around that year mark, I tell people, what are we doing? Are we
Mm.
existing in these recovery houses out here, just like waiting for the opportunity to drop in your lap? Because that's unlikely to happen. Like, what do you want to do? You used to love working in HVAC. For some reason, I always use HVAC. You always loved working when you worked as a summer as a technician in an HVAC company. Go to school. There's a Penco Tech right in Bristol, right around the corner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like let's make moves like that. Those are the types of people I like to kind of surround myself with. Like, are the people who are making moves to get themselves to whatever is next. And I feel like when the 19-year-old or 20-year-old has that social support group, like you mentioned, Tony, that are making those moves,
Yeah.
they don't want to be the one not.
No.
They don't want to be the one, oh, you're making moves to go back to school and get degrees or start, your own landscaping company or LLC, something that you're going to go into business for yourself. They don't want to move back in with mom and dad at that point, right? Like, and it's not to say that shouldn't be a goal to aspire to, but it's like, what are we doing? That's like my fundamental question is like, what are we doing? What are we doing with this for the younger adult population, the failure to launch population, the ones that are still heavily relying upon mom and dad population? Like, what are we doing to help us to get to? And I did that at 29. So it's not like it should be within this earlier onset of early 20s or anything like that. But I needed that. And that's why I love doing the family programming, because working with Mace would remind me of what my mother had benefited from that changed my life, because my mom learned how to apply these principles of, listen, if you're going to do that, you're not doing it in my house, right? And this is my house. This isn't the house that you get to live in because I allow you to, type of thing, right? And I mean, it does, like it always comes back to, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, are we just trying to, and at times we just feel like we need to just survive the day, right? But then there's other times where I'm like, I'm trying to make some moves here, and I try to surround myself with people who kind of do the same thing, like I have a network of people, like Matt said, like it's small, it's concentrated, you know what I mean? Like two of them were guys that I met the first day I got out to this area, and those two guys were in my wedding a year and a half ago, right? Like those are the types of moves I'm talking about, like where as our lives progressed, like we moved with it. You know what I mean? Like we were no longer, I think that's where people get jammed up, is like, I'll ask a dude with 5 years sober, like, what are you grateful for? Oh, I'm grateful to not be waking up hungover. Like, that's awesome. But like, what else, right? Like let's be forward thinking here, right? Like, you're grateful for two things: where you're going or where you no longer are. If you're too far down the line and you're still only just grateful for where you no longer are, like, does that suggest you don't really have something to be working toward? And that's, I mean, something I found to be true in my own experience, where I'm like, I need to be grateful for today because it could be back there, but yet still, like, my eyes are forward. You know what I mean? My eyes got to be going forward. Otherwise, I get stagnant. I get stagnant.
So is what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, keep me honest, guys, that for the younger population, that 18 to late 20s, that you would tell family members or advise them, suggest to them not to have their loved one come home.
I would say, what are you going home to? Like, I get it. If you're 45, you have a spouse, you have two kids that you're trying to get ready to send off to college. They depend on you to feed them and, pay the way and support them. Like, I get that. Like, you're not just going to be like, oh, sorry, guys, I'm going to hang out in Levittown for
Yeah,
the next
I'm
5 years.
going to be
Like,
in a recovery house. Yeah,
good
that's
luck,
not
But if you're 22, 25, whatever, like, what are you going back to? Because you clearly weren't happy where you were, Like, maybe you had a relationship, maybe you were single, you probably like had a job you didn't like or lost a job that you did like somewhere along the way, depending on how like your run went. Um, and it's like, what is at home that I need to get back to? Because all those
Yeah.
things can be, hey, I can, get that job. I can be the best burger flipper. I can buy that new TV, like whatever it is, I can salvage. Um, but what I would say is I think it comes down to motivation. And ideally, you want someone that's going to be internally motivated. So that's hey, I've been raised in this way that I have this sense of I want to achieve great things. I want to have a purpose. I want to be proud of the job that I have and the money I make and what I can provide for myself and other people. And that requires me to go out, get a job and figure out what I want to do. But not everyone's like that. I get that. You know, some
Mm-hmm.
people weren't raised that way. Some people just don't have the self-esteem or whatever at this point in their life. So where does the external motivation come in? That's, hey, I need to figure out how to not be homeless.
Yeah.
Hey, I can't go home because my parents won't let me, so I need to, pay for my own food or my own car or
Mm-hmm.
get to, whatever. I want to see my girlfriend and that requires me to have 250 for the bus every Friday, like whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that's where the the family influence comes in of, hey, we're going to establish these boundaries or we're not going to enable you anymore. We're not just going to put $500 in your bank account and every month and then like
Yeah.
sign you up for EBT so you don't have to get a job or, we're going to pay for your car. Like the external motivation is kind of a force until someone finds that internal motivation, I think, to want
Mm-hmm.
to go out and get sober, get a job, work towards something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, in my personal experience, it was never when I was younger and a little bit older. It never was beneficial for me. Number one, going back to where I did the mess at, and then number two, going back to my parents' house. And for those, the audience who doesn't know, I have I have a set of the best parents in the world that have been in support of me for a very long time in my addiction. But here's the key factor for me, and this is what I want the families to take away from this from me. So, and I'll use my family as an example. I have a very successful brother, older brother, who is very supportive of me in my recovery. I have two parents who were very successful in their own professions, who are very supportive of me in my sobriety. But at the end of the day, not in my dynamic, none of the three of them are alcoholics.
Mm-hmm.
And none of the three of them, and I'll add this next piece to it, none of the three of them have degrees and licensed therapists about drug counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that none of the three of them at the end of the day are going to keep me sober. See, I need another alcoholic. I need another person who has been through what I've been through. And I need to be in a community of people, especially early on, who the book says the best medication for us is one alcoholic sitting down with another one and sharing their experience, strength, and hope with them. That's
Mm-hmm.
what keeps me sober. If I go home to people who are not one of me, into a community around that I was possibly getting in trouble in, or whatever the case was, and there are people that are not like me, there is no possible way for me to stay sober. So I need to run to the community and stay around the community that the people are sober in, and that I know other alcoholics and addicts who are like me are in recovery. So that heightens my chances of staying sober. And I always tell family members, every time that I went from a treatment center into a sober house, I always stayed longer than when I just left that treatment center and went back to my old apartment, went back to my family's house, went back to the girlfriend's house. I never made it longer than 30 days. But when I went to that sober house, I extended out to a year and a half, because it gave me a greater chance being around other alcoholics to stay sober.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with both of their points about it, Mace, honestly. And I think I'd probably be a little bit candid to be so direct in certain cases, appreciating so much of it is case by case, obviously. But I do truly agree. It's like the ultimate irony, right? It's like before they maybe went away to treatment, it was, I just wish he'd grow up. I just wish he'd act his age. I just wish he'd be able to do all these things. And then on the part of the individual, right? On the loved one, it's, I wish I could just do these things. I wish I was more independent. I wish I was. But then it's like when the going gets tough and we have to begin to actually start to put some more action behind our words, it's easier to go back home, right? Whatever that looks like. It's easier to go back to mom and dad's. And that's for me kind of the fundamental irony in it all. You know what I mean? My mother was never shy to point out that she was married at 22 and a homeowner early on. And like, just, and obviously the times were different, but that's no excuse. You know what I mean? So it's like, I recently realized it to be something that I don't even think it's a clinical term, but it works. It's like this idea of like comparative shame, right? Like the younger adults have this sense of what I call comparative shame because of this like digital social media world that we live in. It's like, if I'm 21 years old and I'm in treatment, I'm looking at my Instagram and Facebook, and I'm looking at all these people that I just graduated high school with 3 years before, who are all about to maybe graduate college with their undergrad, and I'm in treatment, right? And I'm just like, I'm never gonna amount to anything and stuff like that. Or, the middle adult, the middle 20 is like, I should be graduated by now. I should be owning a home by now. And then for me, it was the late 20 of I should have a family by now and a house and a degree. And I had none of those things, right? And it's not to say it's a race to get to that, but it's like, at what point would have going home and enabled me the chance to, now again, for the person who's been to one treatment center, maybe, right? Very well, maybe. Like maybe you do need to return home and with this newfound motivation, with what you've learned, with learning that there are these places you can plug into for support outside of your immediate home, sure, right? But if you're an experienced treatment goer like I was, there was no reason for me to suspect that after 5 rehabs, me going back home to my mom and dad's house at 25, that I was going to all of a sudden, like, it was going to come on, right? Like, and that's the lie we tell ourselves as addicts is I know what I have to do, right? It's my favorite line that makes me just want to put my head through this wall. I know what I have to do. Bullcrap. We don't.
Famous last words.
We don't, right? And that's the thing. It's like, and what is it that makes us think we do, right? Because we've been to so many places, or we've been around so many people, or we think it's as simple as if I don't pick up this bottle or this drug, then my life's not going to go in this awful direction. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But what makes me pick up the drug? That's what I don't know. That's what I needed the steps for. You know what I mean? Like considering myself a learned person who went to college, something, you know what I mean? Like I thought I could outthink my substance use. And I thought the more treatment I went to and the more people who looked like I didn't want to look eventually and live life I didn't want to live life like that, I could learn from their mistakes, and I can not get that bad. And that was an idiot. That was idiot's a rough word. That's a naive and ignorant thinking, right? And my feeling is it is exact. I didn't know what I had to do. I just wanted to pretend like I knew what I had, and that's the way I sold my way back to my parents' house. Is I know what I have to do, Mom. I got to go to meetings, and I'm going to go back to school. And like Tony said, 30 days later, like I'm like, yeah, it happened again.
Right.
Joe, I'm curious, what was your breakthrough moment where, you were ready to get serious about your recovery?
I think it was a combination of a few things, to be honest. I'm not one for if you go to page, what is it? 456 in the big book, something like that. There's a page called Spiritual Experiences that ultimately breaks down that in big book, there's 2 forms of that. There's the one of the sudden and spectacular upheaval, which is the white light experience, right? And then there's one that a psychologist that's in the big book calls of the educational variety, in the sense that it happens slowly and over a period of time of realizations. And I think that was my feeling about when I was ready, right? To answer your question. Like, I don't have this one moment of like, I've overdosed over 10 times. I've been Narcaned over 10 times. I've woken up in ambulances. I've woken up in handcuffs, Narcaned. I've had every moment where you could say objectively, like, oh, it must be then, right? Like, again, read Bill's story in the big book. It's my favorite read, because every time you're reading it through, you're like, oh, this must be where Bill gets it. Oh, this must be where Bill gets it. Because we're reading it. So he obviously did eventually, right? And then it's like, this time I meant business. And the next line is like, but I came home drunk again. Like, that was my experience. Like, so I didn't have
I knew what I had to do.
I knew what I had to do. That's essentially what Bill was trying to say. So I didn't have like this one thing, Mace. I'd say a combination of a few things. COVID was a big influence, because for the first time, the life, in my opinion, didn't revolve around me. My brother was about to be, a father for the first time with my first nephew, Vincent. And he hit me with I'm afraid my son's only going to know who you are for you being on a mass card with your face and your September 2nd, 1990 dash, whatever day they find you dead, right? Like that was an influence on me, sure. But I got around some people. Like like the guys I met the first day I got out here, like one of them was trying to reunite with his own kids, and one of them was trying to prove to his grandmother, who loved him more than anything, who raised him, that he was still the boy that she raised from a very young age. So like they were internally and externally, to Matt's point, motivated to improve their lives. And that had such a tremendous impact on me. But I tell people like, yo, if you don't know, I've said it to you, right? Like if you're asking yourself, like, how do I know this time's different, and you don't know, that's okay. Like I didn't, you know what I mean? Like if somebody were like, well, what's going to make this different? I'm like, I don't freaking know, but ask me tomorrow and hopefully I'll give you a sober answer. And right there kind of implies that this is different. But yeah, I think sometimes we can get too caught up in needing to find that, oh, I can make this the catalyst to me getting my life together. But then what happens if it isn't, right? Then it's like, are you just going to wait for the next one? You know what I mean? Like, so I have found in my experience, it's easier to look back and say, like, man, a lot of those people played a really huge part in my life at the right time. And, a lot of that happened to me for a reason, to further compound my experience, testimony, story, whatever. But I mean, it could have ended a decade ago, right? Like it didn't. And I'm very fortunate, I guess, that my experience is what it is. But yeah, I'd say that there were several things, but not just one thing, not just COVID, not just getting, into a recovery house in Levittown. It was a series of things, much like I think what drew me to substances was a series of things, right? Like, I spent a lot of time trying to get to the root of the problem, right? And Tony shared a bit, and I've shared this with all of you. Like, we've always joked about it, right, Mace? Like, if you take the ACEs score and I take the ACEs score, our scores are very different, right? You almost score with a lot of what would be considered by experts as, oh, this person may have behavioral health struggles later in life. And then my score on that test is one. My father is in recovery from alcoholism. Other than that, I grew up in a middle to above middle class family in South Jersey. Parents are going to be married 50 years in 2 weeks from today on April 14th. And, I had this like seemingly very normal life, and I didn't know why thought I chose, right? That's a topic for another podcast, whole episode, probably, on choice versus non. But like, I didn't know why I loved to do what I did. But then I read the big book, and it says men and women drink essentially because they like the effects produced by alcohol. And it's almost as if years of me trying to get to the root of my cause were suddenly just like, dude, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what inspired you to clean it up. It doesn't matter what drug you to such depth. Like, there's time to work on that, be they in therapy, if we're talking history of trauma, or be they in the doing of a fourth step, if we're talking about that comparative shame and having that backpack of guilt that you carry around forever. That's what a fourth step's for if you're in NA or AA, right? So there's time to get to that. But like, when I read men and women drink essentially because they like the effects produced by alcohol, I was like, that's as good of an excuse for me as any. Is good day, let's drink. Bad day, let's drink. Like, you know what I mean? Because it didn't matter. It was just, I liked myself with a foreign substance and anything that got me into an altered state of mind. You know what I mean? And I got to a point where I was willing to look into the eyes of my own mother and say, I'm not going to do it again, knowing damn well as soon as she turns her back, I'm going to do it, and that's only the hell of addiction, you know what I mean? And the hell of alcoholism that the loved one and the family are all too familiar with.
It's a really interesting point, because if you take the three of us that are in recovery on this podcast, knowing, what I know about each of our stories, I don't think any of us are what you would see as like the traditional addict, like someone that has an upbringing where it's like, oh, they were physically abused in childhood, or they were
Mhm.
adopted and and had this sense
Mhm.
of abandonment, or any of the typical like things that you would associate. It's just like what the hell happened? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
where did that switch flip in our brain? And it's not, I don't think it was any of those like big T trauma things. It was
Right.
just these little sort of, hey, like this happened to me in seventh grade. It kind of invalidated my self-esteem a little bit. And then that
Mhm.
was further compounded by X. And like, I don't, but it's so weird. Like you said, it's just something that I found along the way that made me feel better about, physically in the
Yeah.
moment, but also made me feel better about who I was. And I just kept doing it and I kept doing
Yeah.
it until it became a habit and I couldn't get out of it. And I think that's why the rooms are so important, is because all those things you were talking about earlier with the where you're at in life and going on
Mhm.
social media, which is super toxic, by the
Yeah.
way. We could do a whole episode on that.
Yep.
Because I'm in recovery, a professional, almost 30, and I
Mhm.
still go on Facebook and feel like shit about myself
Yeah.
sometimes. But and I
I don't
was,
mean to laugh, but it's true. It's why I
dude,
had to get off, because I know how my mind goes with that stuff.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and now I
100%.
at least can have the wherewithal to recognize when that's happening, and I just put my phone down. But when I'm in active addiction, I'm 24 years old, I'm drinking myself into oblivion, getting fired
Right.
from my job, have no romantic prospects, like $0 in my bank account, and I'm seeing friends getting engaged, having kids,
Mhm.
buying houses, getting
Yep.
promoted, going on vacation. I'm like, dude, where the hell did my life go wrong?
Yeah.
Like I was supposed to have all these things based on like the promises of my parents or grandparents who have
Right. Yeah.
thought I was a very special boy or whatever,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
it's just but that when you come into the rooms, you realize you're like, man, I'm not the only person that feels like that. And I'm
Yeah.
not the only person who's either been through the craziest of crazy things that I've been through, or just like these small things that added up to just kind of derail me a little bit,
Yeah.
and you can find a similar story with anybody in the room and just feel better about your own experience.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that comparative shame, it keeps us in that cycle of my life sucks, so I drink because my life sucks, and it doesn't offer me until
Mhm.
I find. And like, I think this is also something that's not often really discussed early on, that, may be more of a blunt, hard truth, but nevertheless doesn't make it any less true, is like, sometimes we just need to bear down. You know what I mean? Like, especially early on, like, yes, like we tell people in the rooms, pray about it, call somebody, go to a meeting, and and all that's true. But like, it's also like, at times I'd be remiss if I didn't just, tell a sponsee or someone I care about early on, just like face to face, like, sometimes you're gonna be faced with an easy excuse to go do it, and you need to not. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I
Mhm.
could sit there, you need to pray about it, and they could be like, man, miss me with that, or you got to go to a meeting, and it could be 2 a.m. And I would tell people, like, that's why I think a spiritual relationship is so unbelievably important. Is like, you could walk out of your recovery house, and the dude that just got kicked out for getting high could have dropped a bag right in front of the door, and now it's you, a bag of dope, or your drug of choice right there on the ground in front of you, and it's
Mhm.
midnight, and you need to make the right decision because no one's answering the phone because everyone's
Mm.
tired and asleep, and there's no meetings going on, and maybe you're, you know what I mean, like, there is only a pray about it in that situation. So if you haven't formed that higher power yet, that's okay. That's going to be your cross, or your bridge to cross ultimately, but you better be ready to bear through that moment. And that's
Mm.
going to suck, and getting high is going to be easy, and the excuses are going to be there, but guess what, it came down to, and this is one of those times, Mace, where I realized, like,
Mhm.
okay, like, things are different. You know what I mean? Is the first excuse for me to throw it away, I didn't take, where every time before that, I took it because it was so much
Mm.
easier, which again, don't make it easier to make the excuse easier by returning to the life that you said you wanted to leave when you went to rehab or treatment in the first place. Back to the point of why maybe it's not best to go back home. But yeah, like, I don't think that that's kind of discussed enough, because whether it's like long timers or old timers, or even people who just like want to help people, they'll hit them with like, pray about it, go to a meeting. And I'm just like, sometimes you just got to bear down. You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you
Mhm.
just got to, you know, remember. I don't believe in the play the tape through. I don't think that's anywhere in anybody's literature for recovery, because my tape's broken and it's in my voice and it tells me to do it. So I don't hit people with the play the tape. I hit people like, I was a baseball player, I was an athlete. So I kind of think in sports metaphors. Like, I think about the manager who walks out to the mound to talk to his pitcher. He's not taking him out, but he's telling him, like, you better throw your best fucking pitch right now. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I tell myself is, like, I need to bear down. Like, I need at times to, and at this point now, 3.5 years later, there is prayer. There is a spiritual life. There is, the obsession for me has certainly been lifted. So it's fewer and far between. But yeah, early on, it's like, you can't pretend like there's always this, spiritual go-to or perfectly described AA, thing. I'm like, dude, the guys who first started this, like, there wasn't a meeting every hour like there can be now, depending on where you live. Like, they had to get through it. And that's, yeah, I say it's not sexy. You know what I mean? It's not the sexiest thing to tell somebody. You got to bear down and get through it, but it can save a life, because once I get through it, then I give myself the evidence to be like, okay, like, first of all, you can, right? You can do it. Oh my God, that was a revelation for me, right? And then secondly, it's, all right, now I've proven to myself that I can do it. And if I'm working on these virtues that are affiliated with recovery or with spirituality and stuff, then, I don't fit well with knowing I have the ability to do something and then not do it. Like, be honest, right? If I have the ability to be honest, it doesn't feel right to be dishonest anymore, because I know I don't have to be. I've proven it to myself. So if I can bear down and get through a difficult moment, especially early on, it robs from me the excuse to give in the next time. I can't say, I had to. Someone dropped my bag of choice right on the ground. What was I supposed to do? It's like, you bear down, get through it, and then the next time a situation like that comes up, you have no excuse to use.
I think something that family members would be curious and would want to know, you all have 3+ years. How do you, at 3+ years, and just like in closing remarks, do you have any non-negotiables that you still do to, maintain this path you're on?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question because I was a perfect example of it today. So about, like I said, I think I mentioned I don't work in town anymore. I take the turnpike an hour away, an hour back every day. And it has altered my schedule and altered my life to the point to where the things that I was doing in order to stay sober when I first came around, the first couple of years, I'm not able to do anymore. So I went today and, I talked to my sponsor. He's on work leave right now because he's having back surgery at the end of this month. So I went and I just told him, I said, this is, and thank God. For me, the first non-negotiable is that there's never been a morning. I got sober in state prison the last 2 years I was in there, and there's never been a morning where I hit my knees and said, God, please keep me sober, and then thanked him. God, thank you for keeping me sober since I got sober. And that was the 2 years I was even in there before I got out and started actually working through the steps and working the program this time. So that's my first non-negotiable. But another big one kind of for me, and I got it from my guy, Eddie Quinn, God rest his soul. We were talking about him today when I was at my sponsor's house because that's his son-in-law. And he, Eddie always told me, Eddie said, Tony, my life seems more balanced for me. He was just speaking for himself when I do at least make 3 meetings a week. And he said, I've got 15 years sober, And so I've kind of used that it doesn't say that in the book. It doesn't give us a number in the book. It just says, whatever you need or working with another alcoholic. But my 3 meetings, and I've struggled to make my 3 meetings since I started going to Norristown. So I told my sponsor, I said, for me, my history shows I start working, I move up in the ranks, I make more money, and then I'm gone. Because I forget everything that I push everything to the side that got me to where I'm at. And he knew a little bit about that, but I said, I'm just telling you that the guy that in Virginia that I spent years coming in and out of his program, that's what he would tell you. He said, that's what Tony does. My parents will tell you that's what he did. So it scared me on Thursday night when I told my sponsor, I said, yeah, I'm going to be back. I'll make the meeting. And a couple clients came in late, had to stay because, I helped I'm assistant manager up there, and me and the manager had to stay. I didn't make it back. that was enough, that little thing. And it was no big deal because I texted my sponsor, said, hey, dude, I'm not going to be able to make it to the home group because we had the business meeting afterwards. But that, for me, that was like, enough is enough. So I went over, today, and I said, hey, man, I got to get more of a grip back on what I'm doing so that I don't begin to veer off. Because I could probably fake it and do that for a year, but eventually I know for me, a drink or a drug is behind that. And he said, set boundaries for yourself with your job and stick to them. And if you got to leave early on a day to get back for a meeting, then is the job more important than your sobriety? And I said, absolutely not. Then he said, show me. Don't tell me. Take the action, follow through with the action. But overall, I'm doing great. My life has not been better than it has been. But for me, the non-negotiables are the simple things of conscious contact with God every day, trying to help somebody, whether it's a homeless guy in the street or whether it's a sponsee calling me, and then, making a home group meeting and making my 3 meetings a week that I choose to make. Those are my non-negotiables. When I lose touch of one of those, or if I haven't worked with a guy or sponsee in months and I haven't taken anybody through the steps in a month or gone through them again with my sponsor again, that's just a small sign for me as to I've got to start doing something more in that area. And then I have a person to run it off of. So I did that exact thing today. Went by his house, had a great conversation with him. And there's just those, you got to know what your MO is. You got to be honest with yourself and know what took you out those times and understand what your pattern was there and break that pattern and make a new pattern in order to keep your longevity and sobriety.
Yeah, that's kind of also what mine is. Being a AA guy that believes in the big book, it tells us that those who relapse are ones who fail to enlarge upon their spiritual life. And then if you read the page 16 at the bottom, it breaks down what failing to enlarge upon your spiritual life actually looks like by not doing 2 things. One of them is expressing faith, and the other is self-sacrifice for other people. So I know that I have to be in service and work with other guys. I know for a fact that if I don't, then I am likely to forget ultimately what it obviously was like. And I think that's what people try to make their non-negotiable. I'm never gonna forget what it was like, but I will. You know what I mean? Because the same book also says frothy emotional appeal will seldom suffice. Frothy emotional appeal for me is seeing the new guy come in and saying, God, thank God I'm not that anymore. Even if I'm willing to go help him. If I'm thank God I'm not that anymore, that's frothy emotional appeal. That's me, not enjoying in the unfortunate of others, but it's thinking that me remembering where I used to be will keep me here where I am. That's just not the case. So I stay in service. And then the other one, I ask God every day to not allow me to compromise on my newfound integrity. You know what I mean? Because now it's not about me anymore. Now just beneath this floor is a 16-month-old. That's my son that depends on me for everything. So I am afraid deathly of my wife in a healthy way. But deep down, I know that she knows her husband. You know what I mean? And for real, if I stop being in service to other people and I pick up once, she deserves to take that kid and make sure that he's protected from his father, because she knows just from knowing stories about what I'm capable of. And when I say won't let me compromise on my integrity, I am a man in recovery, but I am also that boy's father now. And that's an amazing blessing, but it also comes with an incredible responsibility of, if I were to say this drink won't affect me, knowing what I know, or I can do one, knowing what I know, I am essentially saying it's more important for me to think what I need is more important than being, Salvatore's dad and Anna's husband. And that I today, and for today only, I refuse to compromise on that integrity, right? That says, I am a man who's married to a beautiful young woman, and I am a man who is a father to a 16-month-old son before I am a man who works in the field, or a man who enjoys golf, or a man who enjoys his rest and stuff. Because those are the things that'll be I can have one. I'm just playing golf. I can drink one at the turn. It's not going to be a big deal. Like that's, and it's just like, no, right? It's not. So staying in service helps me to remember that, but also just, knowing like I work my ass off to get here, as we all have. You know what I mean? Like it's I'll take being front door famous to that little 16-month-old who, when he sees me come home now, he can do his little like run up to see daddy. Like you know what I mean? Like I get it. And that's Manny, dude. Manny gave me that advice of the best day of your life. You won't realize it then. Like that's for your wife. He told me when your son's born, like that's not for you. It's for your wife. It'll hit you though at one point. And he was dead on. It was like Salvatore was like 6-7 months. Salvatore noticed I came through the door and he reacted to me coming home and he reached for me and I'm like, this is it. This is the. I texted Manny right away. I'm like, it just happened. Like, you know what I mean?
That's cool.
I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving that up. No, not for anything.
Yeah,
we gotta hear yours, man. Yeah, we gotta hear yours.
Dude, I'm thinking in like I think it comes back to the small stuff again, and this is just kind of almost like a cumulative effect of, you were talking about before, and the word that I was like hearing you say was conviction. And like I feel like I have the conviction that it's like I don't drink anymore. It's not like I am trying to not drink. This is something that I'm not. It's like I am not the person that drinks anymore. And because I feel like the difference between, and I've said this before, like the difference between white knuckling sobriety and being in recovery is, why am I not picking up?
Right.
And if the reason I'm not picking up is because I'm just fighting against it, that's a losing battle. I'm trying to run up the down escalator. I'm gonna get tired eventually and I'm gonna fall flat on my face. But if the reason I'm not picking up is because I think that my life is genuinely better when I'm not picking up, then it's like, why would I want to why would I want to shoot myself in the foot to like try to, have fun or something? So when I know that I can wake up tomorrow and I'm gonna have a better life and feel better and get closer to those goals and create a sense of purpose, like that makes me not want to pick up. And I think, connection is huge for me. Being surrounded by people that I know, I've been in situations, I'll go to like a New Year's party and there's people all around me drinking, but everyone that I'm friends with there would slap the shit out of me if they saw me pick up a drink. No one's in the corner trying to convince me like, oh man, it's just one tequila shot. I'm like, no, it's 2 tequila bottles. There's a difference. And that, like, that protection around me definitely helps me. I had a weekend maybe a month ago where I was just locked up in my room doing schoolwork. I was also feeling kind of sick. I didn't come out, and my friend texted me. He's like, "Hey buddy, you okay?" And I was like, "Why does this feel like a wellness check?" Guys don't talk to each other
He was 12
like
stepping
that.
you.
Yeah, I'm like, my friends and I are assholes to each other. We don't talk to each other like that. So I knew, I was like, yeah, it's kind of been isolating a little bit. I gotta, pull myself out of this. So like having people in my life that kind of call me on my shit, are help me see my blind spots. I think continuing with therapy has been big for me. Just working on, all of the things and having awareness of, hey, if I start to stray from this path, am I going to catch myself? Is someone else going to catch me before I'm too far gone and I'm just days, weeks, or months from a relapse?
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. I think one of the takeaways that I'm taking with me from this conversation is, for a lot of family members, when we're in the trenches and it's just really hard to see how difficult experiences fit into the bigger picture. But when I'm listening to each of you, it's like, wow, like your life experiences, um, fit, everything fits into the bigger picture of where you are right now and all the wisdom that you've gained through overcoming addiction, and it's just so hard for us to see it when we're in it.
Yeah.
So very, very encouraging and inspiring. And I just kept hearing you say over and over, it's like, you have to do it. We can't do it for you as much as we want to. We can't do it for you. You got to do it for yourselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Joe.
Thanks, Mace.
Thanks,
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Joe.
This is
Thank you,
awesome.
man. Good to see you, brother.